Every investigation begins with evidence, something solid, something that points investigators toward the truth. But what happens when the most crucial piece of evidence is missing? In the case of baby Emmanuel Haro, there is no physical confirmation of what happened. That absence changes everything. It forces investigators and prosecutors to turn to what remains: circumstantial evidence, the results of forensic searches, testimonies from those connected to the case, search warrants that uncover hidden details, and statements that, when compared closely, don't always align. This case is not about a single piece of undeniable proof. Instead, it's about connecting smaller fragments, moments, words, and inconsistencies into a larger picture. And it raises one of the most important questions any court must face: can justice be pursued when the direct evidence is missing, and only the shadows of truth remain? But before we dive into this, kindly subscribe to our channel if you believe in fighting for justice. Because every view, every comment, every subscriber is a stand against silence and a step toward justice. We've just crossed 6,000 subscribers, all because of your support, and we need that same energy to reach 7,000, then 8,000, and then 10,000. So go ahead and drop your fingerprints on that subscribe button, and definitely where you're watching from, because wherever you are, the day this vision is fulfilled, I will send my appreciation straight to you. Let's keep building this community that stands and fights for justice together. In most criminal cases, evidence speaks louder than words. But in the case of Emmanuel Haro, the absence of one crucial element, clear physical confirmation, has forced investigators, prosecutors, and the public to focus on something far less certain: the shadows left behind by circumstantial details. This case is not being built on direct proof. Instead, it relies on patterns of behavior, testimonies from those connected, and statements that do not always align. Without physical confirmation, every detail takes on greater weight, and the search for justice becomes a matter of piecing together fragments into a larger, more complex picture. To understand the case, we need to step back to who Emmanuel Haro was and the circumstances surrounding his disappearance. Emmanuel was reported missing in August 2025. His mother initially told investigators that he had vanished under unusual circumstances. That account set off a widespread search effort and drew immediate public concern. But as the timeline unfolded, authorities began to question key details. Inconsistencies emerged between what was reported and what could be verified. What started as a missing child report gradually shifted into a more complex criminal investigation. Both parents were eventually taken into custody and formally charged. Yet one crucial fact remains: no physical confirmation of Emmanuel's location has ever been found. That absence continues to shape the case, forcing prosecutors to rely heavily on circumstantial evidence, testimonies, and patterns rather than a single piece of direct proof. When most people think of evidence, they picture something direct, like a clear photograph, a recorded statement, or a physical object that cannot be disputed. But in many investigations, especially this one, the case depends largely on what is known as circumstantial evidence. Circumstantial evidence is not direct proof. Instead, it is a collection of facts that, when taken together, can point strongly toward a conclusion. Think of it as a puzzle. Each piece on its own may not tell the full story, but when combined, the picture becomes clearer. In the case of Emmanuel Haro, investigators are looking at several kinds of circumstantial details. First, there are timeline inconsistencies in the accounts given by the parents. Certain statements do not perfectly align with established facts, and these gaps raise important questions. Second, search patterns have been carefully analyzed. Specific areas were targeted because of information gathered during the investigation, clues that guided law enforcement to places where answers might be found. Third, witness reports have been considered. Observations about behavior before and after Emmanuel was reported missing provide valuable context and help investigators assess credibility. While none of these details on their own may serve as undeniable proof, their collective weight can be powerful. When circumstantial evidence is consistent across multiple sources, it can form a strong foundation for a legal case, even in the absence of direct confirmation. In any investigation, forensic work plays a central role. It is the science behind uncovering what cannot be seen at first glance. Forensic teams usually focus on three main areas: trace evidence, which can include even the smallest physical clues; digital data, such as phone records or location tracking; and scene analysis, where specialists study environments connected to the case for anything unusual. In the case of Emmanuel Haro, the forensic evidence available has been limited. Teams carried out extensive searches, some supported by trained search dogs, in areas believed to hold potential answers. Digital warrants were also issued, giving investigators access to electronic records that could provide insights into movement, communication, and timelines. Each of these steps was designed to add another piece to the puzzle, and yet significant gaps remain. Despite the thorough work, no single piece of forensic evidence has been strong enough to resolve the case on its own. This means investigators must rely heavily on combining forensic steps with circumstantial evidence, testimonies, and legal documentation in order to build a clearer picture of what may have happened. Another important layer of this case comes from testimonies. These are the voices of family members, neighbors, and professionals, who in different ways are connected to the timeline of events. Testimonies help fill in gaps that physical evidence alone cannot always explain. They provide perspective on what was seen, what was heard, and how individuals behaved at critical moments. But testimonies also present unique challenges. People may recall details differently, or their accounts may shift over time. Memory, perception, and even the stress of the situation can affect what someone reports. This is why investigators and prosecutors carefully compare statements, looking for points that remain steady across multiple accounts, as well as places where details do not fully align. In the courtroom, credibility becomes central. A testimony that is consistent, clear, and supported by other evidence carries far more weight than one that changes or stands alone. In Emmanuel Haro's case, testimonies have been an important tool for building the broader picture. While not always definitive, they help strengthen or challenge other forms of evidence, and they remain a vital part of the legal process. Another important element in this investigation has been the use of search warrants. A search warrant is a legal order that allows investigators to look for information in specific places, whether that means a home, a vehicle, or digital devices. These warrants cannot be issued without solid grounds. Investigators must present enough supporting information to a judge to demonstrate that there is a valid reason for the search. In the case of Emmanuel Haro, search warrants provided investigators with access to potential sources of evidence that could not be obtained otherwise. This included digital records, location data, and items connected to the family environment. Each search was carried out with the goal of either confirming or disproving parts of the timeline already under review. In situations where direct evidence is missing, these legal steps become even more significant. Search warrants give investigators a structured way to uncover additional details and ensure that the information gathered is legally admissible in court. In a case like this, every small discovery, whether physical, digital, or documentary, helps to strengthen the overall framework of evidence. One of the most closely examined aspects of this case has been the statements given by those directly involved. Investigators pay careful attention, not just to what is said, but to how accounts hold up when compared against timelines, witness observations, and other available evidence. When a statement changes or contains details that do not align with established facts, it raises important questions. These shifts, often called inconsistencies, do not automatically prove guilt, but they do require closer scrutiny. Investigators highlight these differences to test credibility and to see whether a version of events can be supported by other evidence. In the absence of direct physical proof, inconsistencies become even more significant. They can reveal gaps in the story, show areas that need further investigation, or point toward information that has not yet been fully explained. In a circumstantial case like Emmanuel Haro's, these differences in statements play a central role in shaping how the legal process unfolds. They help prosecutors and the court determine whether the overall picture being presented is reliable or whether it leaves too many unanswered questions. As the case moves forward, one of the greatest challenges is the lack of direct evidence. In court, the standard is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. That means the evidence presented must be strong enough to convince a jury with a high level of certainty. Without physical confirmation, this becomes more complex. Prosecutors must instead rely heavily on indirect but compelling elements, circumstantial evidence, forensic steps, testimonies, and documented inconsistencies. Each of these on its own may not be conclusive, but together they can create a narrative that meets the legal threshold. The challenge lies in making sure the story told through these fragments is both consistent and persuasive, leaving as little room for uncertainty as possible. In the absence of direct physical evidence, the search for justice takes on a different form. It becomes a search for patterns, for behaviors, and for truths that may be hidden within inconsistencies. For Emmanuel Haro, investigators are left with fragments of a story, pieces drawn from testimonies, search warrants, and circumstantial evidence. The question now is whether those fragments can be assembled into a complete picture, one strong enough to convince a jury. Until then, the case stands as a reminder of how difficult it can be to find clarity when the most critical piece of evidence is missing.